the Southern Alliance for Clean Energy. I'm from Charleston, South Carolina, and I'm here today speaking in support of placing limits on carbon pollution from power plants in order to protect treasured places like Charleston and other coastal communities in the Southeast. Charleston is a place of significant cultural and historical heritage, but the impacts of climate change, such as sea level rise and ocean acidification, threaten our way of life and our connection to past generations. Charleston has held the designation of the best city to visit in the U.S. by both Condé Nast and Travel and Leisure magazines for the last several years. And if you have visited Charleston, you know why. You know that if the walls of the buildings could speak, they could tell you stories spanning hundreds of years. The walls of the Powder magazine on Cumberland Street would tell you about the original fortification of Charlestown and battles between the South Carolinian colonists and Native Americans, French and Spanish, and later fighting a war for independence. Those with the grand mansions south of Broad Street would speak of the immense wealth generated by King Cotton, while the Emmanuel AME Church on Calhoun Street would speak about the slave rebellion plotted by one of the church's founders. Fort Sumter's ramparts would talk about the first shots of the Civil War fired right there in Charleston Harbor, while the county courthouse would tell the story of hosting the first court case to desegregate public schools in America. Yet these monuments, which serve as a tangible link to our past, are immensely vulnerable to flooding from sea level rise. All of these places are at less than 10 feet above sea level rise, and some are as low as 3. Meanwhile, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration projects as much as 6.6 feet of global sea level rise over the course of this century alone. Not only would this mean losing many national treasures like these, but it would also mean losing much of the backbone of Charleston's current economy. Visitors come here to participate in our rich history, whether by visiting national historic monuments or simply taking in the ambiance while strolling down our cobblestone streets. But it's not just the built environment that gives Charleston its quintessentially southern charm and deep sense of history. Charleston would not be complete without its natural beauty as well. Southern live oaks draped in Spanish moss are an icon of the South and are abundant here, lining the driveways of historic plantations and Sea Island boulevards. Some were here well before Europeans even arrived. The angel oak on John's Island, for example, is thought to be as old as 1,500 years. And not only is it supposed to have hosted ceremonies for Creek Indian tribes, but it's also served as a place of refuge and recreation for families for generations. Yet these live oaks may become threatened as saltwater encroaches upon their root zones due to sea level rise, particularly alongside tidal sources of water, such as those so abundant in the low country. Furthermore, saltwater marshes are home to all sorts of valuable aquatic creatures, including those that have formed the basis of the low country's food traditions for many, many years: shrimp and grits, she crab soup, and oysters, to name a few. Yet these creatures are in peril from the impacts of climate change. Saltwater intrusion combined with drought has raised salinity levels in our marshes enough to begin killing our marsh grasses, which provide the necessary habitat for many of our heritage seafoods, while ocean acidification from excess atmospheric carbon compounds the risk. As you can gather from what I'm saying, Charleston is a place overflowing with rich history and culture, rooted in the built environment, natural landscape, and culinary traditions. Yet these things, which serve as critical links to our past, for our enjoyment in the present, and means of prosperity in the future, are threatened by carbon-fueled climate change. Charleston and South Carolina are not alone in facing these threats. Many coastal cities in the Southeast, such as Wilmington, Savannah, Miami, and Tampa, have completely unique cultural and environmental assets that have persisted for centuries, yet are now jeopardized by catastrophic impacts from climate change. I personally would like to continue to enjoy these treasures for the rest of my life, and I'd like for future generations to enjoy them as much as our generation has. It's for this reason that I wish to express great support for limiting carbon